In a world filled with challenges and opportunities, it's about having the right approach to turn dreams into reality. Whether you're navigating the competitive landscape of business or seeking personal growth, it's all about the approach.
Welcome back to the latest episode of The Approach. Again, the premise of this show goes back to my time working in military intelligence, where I'm really excited about my co host today. My guest is Brian Ponch Rivera, the distinguished former Navy Top Gun and retired Navy captain who has seamlessly transitioned into an influential career as an entrepreneur, author, speaker, and business consultant. He's leveraging his extensive experience from his 28-year military career. He now stands at the forefront of business agility, safety, and resilience. His tenure in the U.S. Navy is marked by his experience in intricate air, space, and cyber operations. He served as both a member and instructor of the elite F-14 demonstration team. Later, he led a team dedicated to enhancing teamwork, leadership, culture, safety, and detecting weak signals within the Navy. His military service profoundly shaped his approach to leadership, decision-making, and strategic thinking. He is now the founder of AGLX Consulting, delving into various strategic and operational systems, such as the OODA Loop, applying these insights to both military and business contexts. Let's welcome to the stage Brian Ponch Rivera.
Thanks for having me, Doc.
Yeah, I always read everybody's bio when they come on, and there's so many things in there that are just striking. But I want everybody to hear from you. Who is Brian Ponch Rivera?
I'm a jerk. No, maybe in some people's eyes, that's all right. Brian, hey man, first generation college grad, excited to go to University of Colorado. Hard to get in when you're the first generation. You don't even know about college.
Yeah.
Learned a little bit about the military from my uncles. They all served in the military, Army, Navy, and Air Force. Never wanted to serve because it scared me. I was like, hey, that's for very, very few people, the elite or whatever. I just didn't have access to the military. And then short story long, I met some Navy pilots in the West Coast. There's an old girlfriend involved with this, with her having access to bases and me driving her car on base, meeting these top guns, if you will, and these helicopter pilots. I'm like, God, these guys are idiots. I can do this. Threw my name in the hat, got an officer candidate school, and the rest is history, man. It's been one heck of a ride since. I am a product of public schools. The Navy enhanced my education through an MBA, an MA, joint professional military education, making the rank up to captain. That was cool. Access to some of the most amazing, not just people, but technology as well. And I think it's $6 or $8 million worth of training just to fly in a jet. It's an incredible process. You can exact things from that. And that's what I've done is taking things from there, blended them with some of the things that are out in industry, and then also dove into some of the sciences behind that. And it's just amazing what you find when you do that. So that's the big picture.
Tell us about some opportunities you had being an officer and then being able to go into such an elite program like Top Gun. What were some leadership opportunities during that time in your career?
I want to be clear. I did not graduate from Top Gun. I was Top Gun trained. There
Yep.
is a time when we had the opportunity to go to the weapons school. I chose VF 101. This is an interesting story. Right when the Tomcats were about to transition away, we get the Super Hornets. And this is right after the 9/11. So
Mhm.
really interesting dynamic time where the opportunity for a single man to go out to Fallon, Nevada, or go to Virginia Beach, Virginia, and fly the Tomcat and maybe do the demo. I chose that. I was about to go to the weapons school, but I chose the Tomcat to turn my hair on fire and have some fun. The experience in the Navy at that time is phenomenal. It's how you plan, it's how you brief, it's how you execute, it's how you assess or debrief, and you're in that culture. So you have a process. You have a planning process. You have a feedback process, right? And you shorten those feedback loops. That's how you take a knuckle dragger like myself and you give them the ability to do some pretty cool things in a short amount of time. So that translates quite well into sports. It translates into business, but most people ignore that stuff because they think they already know it. And that's not true. You actually have to practice these things like technical skills. You have to be introduced to them. But there's that aspect of it. And then, of course, there's the education. There's the different pathways you could take in the military. Mine was fighter aviation, F-14s in combat, F-14s as an instructor doing the demonstration. And then I sobered up a bit, and if that makes sense, you throttle back and you go, what am I going to do with my life as I get older? I went into the intelligence community as a foreign area officer. Years after that, you get a pretty interesting career path in the military that, if you do it correctly, you can really expose yourself to quite a bit,
Mhm.
which is some of the advanced training, advanced leadership. We looked at wicked problems. We looked at a lot of things in the educational path. Or you pick another path, which is I want to be an airline pilot, right? You can ignore everything that's going on around you and you can become an airline pilot. Nothing wrong with that. I chose the other path.
No. My second son actually went to flight school up in Oklahoma and had gotten his private and was working on getting his commercial. Because of the physical rigors, he started having a heart palpitation issue and it just flushed him out.
Yeah.
What were some of the physical rigors that you had to endure with that? Because you see all these things, they take these celebrities or they take people and put them in the back of a cockpit. And then the pilot's job is to try to make them throw up on camera.
The more in shape your body is, if you're a long distance runner, you're probably not going to do well in the cockpit. Right. And I've seen this from a shorter body perspective
Mhm.
where some of those people, I'm going to talk about men because I was predominantly around male aviators back then. We did have females at the time, but mainly I was in an air wing that was all male. What we saw there, or what I saw, this is again subjective. It's not necessarily the truth. Science says, but here's what I understand: bigger bodies, taller, a little bit more challenging because of the G's. There's a medium build, but one thing everybody did, and everybody did this, is we lifted weights. We
Mhm.
tried to stay in shape. We had horrible diets and a lot of salt, a lot of alcohol. Not necessarily everybody, but it varies. So you're exposed to that. Plus, you're exposed to daily flights where they step you into physiological. You go through training to understand G's and how to understand how your vestibular system can lie to you when you accelerate from an aircraft carrier at night. You feel like you're going straight up, which is dangerous because when you feel like you're going straight up, you can push the nose over, even though you're already going towards the ground. There's a lot to learn about your body to understand what's going on in the cockpit. This gets into interoceptive capabilities, right? So we talked about the vestibular system, body awareness, flying by the seat of your pants for a reason. It's because there are times your mind is lying to you, right? Because of what you're seeing. The physical requirements are amazing. In the air show, we're constantly pulling 6.5 Gs for 17 to 18 minutes of, as an instructor, I had to do that for 36 minutes. This younger version of Ponch was tired at the end. There are effects on my body now that I'm going through. So it is a physically grueling environment to include, you have a helmet on, and today's pilots are flying around with these big helmets and maybe a heavier weight on their head, like we used to fly
Mhm.
with night vision goggles. So your neck's getting compressed. You're in a seat that's designed for one purpose only, and that's for ejection. It's not for
Mhm.
comfort, right? Your bodies are just getting beat up. What's going on? It's being pulled out of your brain into your lower extremities. You have to build those muscles in your legs to push that blood back up. We also have G suits to help with that. So many things going on then in there. Hopefully, I answered some of the questions that
Yeah.
you're looking at.
Because I have talked to some other pilots that tend to cringe when I ask this. So the body type that people saw in the Top Gun movie is really not your ideal body type based on what you're describing.
Yeah. I would. I was in my first squadron. I was about 6'1" and a half, 6'2". I'm not that tall anymore. About 220, 225. I'm about 232 now, 235. This is a while ago. I think I was the seventh biggest guy in the squadron. We had guys named Moose in the squadron. It was weird to see. It doesn't mean it's always like that, but for the most part back then, um, I lived in Virginia Beach and I see
Mhm.
pilots all the time. They look like little children, but I'm
Yeah.
also older. I think there is a kind of body type that does well. I
Mhm.
believe women do quite well in a jet. Their G tolerance might be higher than ours.
Okay.
It's pretty cool what's going on right now
Yeah.
as far as the integration of women into the combat aircraft. That's been happening for a while.
Yeah.
So
You transitioned to different types of units. Were you ever in charge of any of a group, a squadron, a flight?
let's talk about the difference between the Navy and the Air Force. I spent a lot of time with the Air Force, AT-38 training, Air Command and Staff College, Air and Space Operations Center, which is mainly Air Force.
Mhm.
I'd say 95% Air Force. So in an Air Force pilot's going to go in their first squadron and they're going to fly an airplane, right? Navy, you go to flight training and they send you to a squadron and your job becomes to lead people. So you become a branch officer, a division officer, and so on.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference. Here's a 24-year-old lieutenant junior grade, 25, whatever age. Here's a chief, 32, 33 years old, maybe 35. JG, meet your chief. Here are your troops. Don't fuck it up. I'd say the Navy's leadership apprenticeship program is far superior to anything else. That goes for our weapons school as well. That is another level of training that the Navy SEALs borrowed from fighter aviation, as well as that apprenticeship program. You get thrown into leadership roles, you screw things up. I screwed things up at a young age. You're dealing with sailors messing around with drugs. You're trying to help them. The chief is telling you one thing, you're going another direction, and you find out that chief was right. It's an amazing process and brings some humility early on in your career. Comparing it to the Air Force, you go 12 years on active duty or 8 years at the time. Let's say 10 years.
Mm.
You go to a university surrounded by officers excited about leading a flight. Well, I forgot what they call it.
Yeah.
And they start telling you about this. You're going to be a commander of some kind. And you're like, wow, that's amazing because that means we're taking over a squadron of a couple hundred people. You learn they're excited that after 10 years in the Air Force, they get to lead 5 people. Yeah, they don't make movies. You think about all the great movies out there. Iron Eagle is not a great movie.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to, but you see Top Gun Maverick and people want to
Mhm.
join the Navy if
Yeah.
they know the Navy has aircraft, right? Usually most Americans are like, flying things. I want to go join the Air Force. And
Yeah. It's interesting because when they looked at the statistics after the original Top Gun movie came out, they had such an influx of people trying to get into the Navy that wanted to go into the flight programs that
yeah,
they actually had a long waiting list
yeah.
for quite, and I don't know if, they had the same effect after the Top Gun Maverick movie or not, but
You would, if that were true, then we wouldn't have the shortages we have now, more than likely.
yeah,
And let me throw something at you. When I was flying air shows, everybody at that time driving around with American flag on their car. We're all one United States back then.
yeah,
What I learned about flying air shows is the value on recruitment for the Marine Corps and Army. An air show comes to town. We do our demos, our weekend thing. Next week, recruitment goes up for the Marine Corps. That's a good thing, right? That's one of the reasons we did it, right? To build awareness of our military forces.
yeah. There's always this interesting statistic out there that the quality of your military is always at its highest when you're not in a conflict or at the very beginning of a conflict, and then it tends to dissipate the longer that we're in a conflict. Did you see any of those trends?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll go back to about 2003. The quality of aviator coming through training. Here we are training MIT grads or Ivy League kids. Everybody wants to participate and do something for their country. It's harder to go into fighter aviation unless you're already at the Naval Academy and all that. So
Yeah,
officer candidate schools bringing it more, ROTC's bringing in more higher quality. And again, I'm not saying education's everything for this conversation. You went to MIT and I'm a CU grad. Here's what we noticed. Again, this is subject. This is my view. When you start bringing in people that never failed into an organization where you have to learn how to fail, right?
yeah,
Because I am going to push you to failure. I am going to
mhm,
make sure you don't find success in this simulator. I have to know how you operate.
yeah,
When you do that to people that never experience failure, they don't do well. What I saw at the beginning back 2003, 2004 is that quality, you're getting the best of the best, maybe,
yeah,
but it became harder to train then because we you have to take them through this sense of failure. Fast forward 15, 20 years later, I still saw the great quality coming in. That changed in the last 3 or 4 years. I'm a retired Navy captain. I have 2 girls,
mhm,
and they know their dad does not want them to serve in our current military. I've let our leadership know that, and being Hispanic, you do not want that in your ranks. You do not want people who look around and go, "I don't want my kids in this space," right? Because and that can change. There's a reason we have 17 ships sitting on the sideline. There's a reason you can't man things.
mhm,
Everybody up and down my street, when I live again in Virginia Beach, retired, the person who lives across the street was an instructor of mine when I was a student,
yeah,
early 70s, like grad. He's an instructor now, still in the simulator, and he tells me stories. Couple of retired colonels up and down the street. It is sad because we all get together and we're all like, no way, not going to happen. But
yeah,
here's a problem. And this connects back to what you're doing with your podcast. The approach is important. These signals are telling you what's wrong. The stories that people are saying will guide you what you need to correct.
mm,
If you stop listening to those stories, you'll never correct. If you
yeah.
ignore them and suppress them, I think that's a good recipe for failure.
And I think it's important to understand history,
Mhm.
what happened, trends, what led up to certain things, it's what led to
Mhm.
certain conflicts, and then not repeating those same mistakes. The only way we can actually truly progress is by learning from the mistakes of the past and not trying to repeat them.
And I think that's an important approach when we talk about sense making and decision making. If we misremember the past, we
Mhm.
cannot improve the future. I'm borrowing that from Annie Duke. But just like an effective debrief after a dogfight, you reconstruct the past. What happened? I need an accounting of what happened. That creates situational awareness because that's how you build performance in an organization and in an individual is give them that feedback. They reconstruct. You start to point out things they need to pay attention to so they can dominate the next time they're doing it. And that's the approach that I think the Navy gave us And that's what you want to instill in other organizations. Everybody's trying to figure this out right now. You know that. Yeah. Yeah.
As well, it's very prominent. I know it's very prominent in the special operations community as well, because I've had friends that are former operators, most retired now.
Mhm.
But even on the show, I had a guy that came on, he's a Navy SEAL, and the importance of having those debriefings after running an operation or a mission. In the Army, we call it an after action.
Mhm.
We would run an intel mission, do what we needed to do, get back, and you weren't allowed to take a shower until you sat down and had your debriefing, and everybody compared notes. And then we would use the information out of that to determine, all right, we need to reinforce our training on this, or we need to go back and look at this technique. This didn't work well in the field. So it was great in theory, but not in real life. And go back to the drawing board on that, rethink those types of things. It's important to have those, but in the business world, I don't see a lot of that. Clients don't go back and review what was done.
In the Agile space, there are they call them retrospectives what we call debrief or after action review.
Yeah.
They use like happy faces and sailboats. They're targeting attitudes and beliefs about what they should do next
Yeah.
rather than, so accountability. There's a great definition of accountability, the ability to recount what happened. It's an accounting. Tell me what happened. And what
Yeah.
we know from cognitive science is it's hard to tell a story backwards. That's why we sometimes do that in investigations. They start with tell this story backwards and get whoever they're interviewing to do that. We misremember the past. We are always reconstructing our memories. So the wider gap between the action or the activity and the debrief, the more likely you're going to misremember the past. You're not going to, you're going to reconstruct it in a way that may be beneficial to you. There's other things to think about. You see the world from your advantage point. So sometimes it may be your advantage to tell a story about what happened that didn't happen. So there's a lot of things going on here. So what's happening in industry is they don't pay attention to the science, if you will, of effective debriefing. They pay attention to somebody who's wearing an old lady in white tennis shoes, who's on stage telling you all these great things about collecting insights and data, but that doesn't fix how you should do an effective debrief, right? How do you create psychological safety? By the way, psychological safety, this is fun. Aviation crew resource management, what we've learned in fighter aviation, that a lot of it came from the Navy,
Mm-hmm.
was injected into healthcare. And healthcare professionals around the US, researchers saw this thing where they, within this team environment, able to remove fear where anybody could speak up. And it's called psychological safety. And it's in some books that are behind me right now that connects back to fighter aviation and commercial aviation, by the way. So that's where it came from. So in your organization, and this is me talking to your audience.
Yeah.
Why would you hire somebody who doesn't come from that background to teach you about psychological safety? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
There are qualified veterans that can do
Mhm.
these things, and the majority of them don't even know they know how to do it.
Yeah.
But they can't. So anyway, there's a whole industry out there that's pushing a horrible narrative. You should do a retrospective. When you do it, why you do it. It should be scale free. It should be repeatable. You should have a process for it.
Yeah.
And these processes are an approach to getting things done. It's
Mhm.
important.
Touching back on when you said that we're bringing in these MIT grads, what a common trend in the corporate world is training on resiliency. I know when I was growing up, that was just your way of life. You know, everybody had to be resilient just because I was an 80s kid and we were called latchkey kids. And we, would have to let ourselves into the house, and we had to have our homework and the house cleaned and all those chores done before parents got home. And you became very self-sufficient and self-reliant. And then we have this generation that's coming up where we're trying to overcome some of these aspects where everybody gets a trophy and nobody's allowed to fail. And so that's what it sounds like, is that you are seeing some of that after effect with people that are used to being in an academically high performance environment, that they've done very well. But then when you apply resistance, they don't hold up very well.
Yeah. So that stress where you push people to failure, there's a couple
Mhm.
things in there. One is you want people to fail in front of others, not just by themselves. That way they feel like it's meant to. We do this thing, it's connected to this concept, this anthrosimulation. It's human and machine manipulation of the environment. We do that to push people to failure. If you succeed at something like I hate to say a video game, but if you're doing a offsite as a company organization and you're successful at something, you don't learn from that. You learn more from failure than success. The reason we have simulators in the military, there's many reasons actually, but we push people to their limits, give them complicated things, let them screw up and come back and debrief it. That builds more awareness, because in the cockpit, You don't get a chance to think about this for a while. So this concept of resilience, let's talk about this. I don't have the clinical definition. I'll do my best. There's robustness, which is the ability to bounce back to previous state, right?
Mhm.
Hey, something happened, you punch me, I just bounce back. Resilience is, hey, something happened to me and I created this new capacity to go beyond that. So the next time I'm better, stronger.
Mhm.
Building this adaptive capacity is what we're talking about. And that's what you get from putting stress on a person like muscles. You can't train them the same way every day. You get people in a stressful environment, they get the skills that
Mhm.
allows them to um I'll say be more comfortable in more complex environments, more challenging environments. It's
Yeah.
actually called the challenge skills ratio. You
Mhm.
you build skills up through pushing up, flattening out, pushing up, flatten out.
Yeah.
And then that's how you create high performing teams.
So in the strength and conditioning world, we call it a progressive phase. Then we have a plateau. We want to push people up to a plateau, let them work through that, then go up again.
Recovery is a debrief. That's where the
Yeah.
muscle's built. And so that's it, that connection to individual resilience and performance and organizational performance. It's a flow cycle.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with when you talk about neuroplasticity, when we took look at it from a neurological and cognitive standpoint, there's muscle memory or creating synapses. You provide a stimulus and the brain will figure out a way to do it better next time.
Yeah, we talk about implicit guidance and control, making something that's explicit implicit. So it reduces the energy spend. So think about this teamwork. If I'm worried about how I'm going to work with somebody every single day, requires a lot of energy. So if I use that energy early to teach a new skill, like teaching my kids, I'm a horrible basketball player. I love coaching my kids on basketball. They have a real coach. I
Yeah.
teach you technical skills and I just inject why the coach is doing that. And the coach
Mhm.
is, this is awesome. But anyway, what's going on there is my girls are learning how to build that repetitive thing to reduce the energy that the brain uses to do that thing over and over, right? How do you use your periphery? How do you keep your head up? Turn that into muscle memory, implicit guidance and control, an automatic or autonomic response, right? Same thing happens on a high performing team in fighter aviation. I'll use that as an example. You got all these things going on in the cockpit. You got all these sensors. You got people talking on 4 or 5 different radios. You're in a dynamic environment. It's dark. You're doing all this stuff, but you still have to understand what's going on around you. So
Mhm.
the only way you can build that situational awareness to be more aware of that is to reduce energy your brain needs to do these things, all the stuff going on around you, listening to the radios, looking at sensors. You have to train to that. Once you see more than your opponent, you're going to kick their ass.
So when I've worked with athletes before, and even in the military through specific training, we had to do firearms and tactical training, being able to go in and sweep a building, those types of things. And you would just run it over and over again to the point where it was almost boring and monotonous. But the reasoning behind it was that once you get yourself into a point of fatigue or a heightened state of stress where it's almost like that, not necessarily a foggy feeling, but everything's moving really fast and you're having a hard time keeping up, your brain is going to default back to what it knows based on repetition.
Yeah. That default mode of operation has to be built in. So we go through cycles of destruction and creation. You want to destroy bad default modes
Yeah.
and create new ones based off of the new, whatever the environment's giving you, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
So back to your approach here, the approach in the Navy is the planning process, right? So we don't plan just to execute a plan. We plan so we can deviate from that plan when we experience something in the environment that we weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Just like you just pointed out. When you watch high performing teams do their planning, there's a mental aspect to it, right? They will run through things, not just physically in motion, but visualize what's going on. Great example of this is watching the Blue Angels when they do their pre-flight planning, their brief. It's quiet. Everybody's chair flying, the
Mhm.
difficult maneuvers, that muscle memory has to be there on those commands from the boss. These things are well known to military members. There's a
Yeah.
plethora of science out there that says this is what organizations need to do. There's the pseudoscience world selling crap to leaders and
Mhm.
organizations. If you don't like the science, that's fine. You can go do the pseudoscience,
Yeah.
but later on, you're going to find out that the stuff that makes high performing teams, you and I already know where it comes from. It's called an exaptive practice. It doesn't mean we take it one for one, but we could take the good parts out of it and put it in a new domain and scale it up.
Yeah. Because in high performance teams, everybody wants to be able to have that repeatability performance where they can perform at the same level every time they go out. Did you ever encounter situations where somebody just was not game on?
Yes, I would say all of our workups for our combat cruises, that is the most intense training you will ever go through. And then those are some of the toughest debriefs. Sometimes people have bad days, and sometimes when you have bad days, you don't come home. So yeah, absolutely. We've seen that in air show practices. There's times where we're inverted 40 degrees nose low, running at the ground, pulling through towards the horizon and pulling in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And fortunately, when that happens, you're at a higher altitude. So you come back and debrief. You just go, hey, we're done. Let's talk about this. That's a safety violation. There are times in air shows when you'll just see a performer stop and just, hey, somebody on their team ground, somebody saw something. We're done. We can't continue today. Something's not right. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
That's what you want in an organization. That's what you want when they talk about an andon cord. Hey, we have a quality product. We don't want any more. Let's
Yeah.
stop the line. It's the same type of thinking. There is something that's pretty unique to this. And I learned about this over the years. I can't say this is fact, but here's what I understand. Performance. Think about Sunday football or musicians when they're live, they step it up. Sometimes it gets really good because they have the energy from a crowd around them. The
Yeah.
same is true during air shows. Sometimes the best air shows are the ones that are in front of a live crowd. Why? It goes back to that challenge skills balance. We're in an environment where our skills may not match that challenge
Yeah.
or that perceived challenge, which is, oh my gosh, I'm performing in front of everybody. I may not have those skills that day. It's amazing connection to performance and environment.
The pilot's really good about even before they got in the cockpit, if they knew they were off that day.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when I was flying, there was a air show accident. I think it was in Wyoming. A Thunderbird crashed and the pilot got out fine. What ends up happening then is everybody comes under scrutiny. And I do remember the pressure we felt in a brief one morning that because we had a 200-foot air show, we were a low, big Tomcat, 200-foot air show, which is low compared to the 500-foot air shows that everybody else is doing. We felt the FAA was going to go after us. So based on the briefs, just sensing, we looked at each other and we're like, we're not flying today. It's just not worth our time.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do, to just turn something off that you really want to do.
Yeah. Seeing sports teams, athletes, the stakes are not as high as somebody getting in the cockpit and going anywhere from 2 to 6 Gs and do high performance maneuvers. But they may turn around and say, yeah, he may be off today. We're still going to play him because he's still our number one guy.
You may not be performing at peak, but your worst performance may be better than everybody else. Or it's, yeah. So if you think about, and this is interesting, we're recording this the day after one of the Thursday night CU football game. Hunter Travis had a ridiculous game.
Yeah.
And this goes back to performance. We know that Travis Hunter doesn't drink, right? Doesn't consume alcohol. This generation of kids that are coming up, the consumption is going down. Alcohol is really bad for you. It's probably the worst thing you can put in your body. What happens now in this day and age, we are able to watch things. And I'm wearing a device on my hand, the Whoop, to understand sleep patterns and how my quality of sleep and what's going in my body. So this awareness, I don't know if it's proprioceptive or interoceptive or whatever the body awareness, right? Is critical. A step change in maybe we already have in performance in sports, right?
Yeah.
It's an amazing time to be alive to see what's going on. Going back to Travis Hunter last night from the University of Colorado, I know he's doing what he called cold baths or whatever and thermo stuff. And
the cryo stuff.
this is happening at scale. And then, like I said, my daughter's 13 and 14 as we're recording this, and their basketball skills are far greater than the basketball skills of the boys teams that we had 15 or 10 years ago in high school, right? It's scary, man. It's pretty cool though. AI is going to come in and let's take a kid who's got a basketball hoop outside and is able to set up this AI capability that gives them that instant feedback about their finger positioning on the ball. This is game changing for human performance. I'm fired up about what's coming our way.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to work on the healthcare and sports medicine side with athletes, professional athletes, college athletes. It was always fascinating to me when I first started with that population. It was almost shocking because there's this perception that these professional athletes can be considered hypochondriacs because, oh, this muscle twitches or doesn't feel right. They are so in tune with every muscle fiber that they have that if one little thing is just they can feel it, they can perceive it, they can know exactly where the problem is because they have that intricate awareness within their body.
Yeah. And I think there's going to be interesting solutions for the individuals now that are your custom solutions where there's no one, our bodies are all different. My sleep patterns and the foods my body enjoys and needs may be different than somebody else. So now we're going to get to the point where that's being monitored going into a Thursday night game, going into a Saturday game, going into a Sunday game, going into an afternoon air show, right? What's that sleep pattern? What's that meditation? What's that food that's going to be there? What's that breathing exercise and maximize performance for that day. Is it that vagus nerve breathing, Wim Hof? And that's the space we're in now, which is amazing. Apply that to teams in businesses. How much work can they get done in a shorter time that's high quality? How much time can you get off from work because you got all your work done for the next 6 months and in 3 weeks?
Yeah, those interesting because you brought up the business world. There's still this perception of we've got to be able to put in this certain number of hours. We're looking at quantity of hours rather than quality of work.
Mhm.
People are required to work 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours a day. But if you look, they only produced maybe 2 hours of good, high quality work. The rest of it was just slugging through or maybe got eaten up with meetings or those types of things. It cuts into the efficiency of being able to get high products for the sake of quantity of time.
Yeah, I think I have some numbers that I'm going to get these screwed up. I think we get 11 minutes of focus work done in a day.
Mhm.
Let's see, and your IQ falls 10 points every time you get interrupted in a day.
Mhm.
It could take you up to 23 minutes to refocus after you're interrupted. We switch tasks every 3 minutes. Think about this individual performance. That's just you as an individual coming into an organization. You have all these meetings. You're going from meeting to meeting. The way we show productivity now is by the number of meetings on our calendar. Look, I was so busy, but I got nothing done. That's going to go away soon. We are about to see psychological flow merge with flow systems and organizations. Right?
Yeah.
This could be pretty fantastic. And whoever does that best is going to, I'm going to tell you, make a lot of money.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Just one of the whole things with this show is leadership and problem solving and the approaches to that. So I like to throw this question out, and hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot by asking you this question. So, in all the different things that you've done, what was one of the most difficult decisions that you had to make as a leader?
Wow. I need a minute on that one. Okay, I'll give you one. I'm not going to go too deep, but in retrospect, probably the toughest decision I made, and it was wrong. Outcomes and decisions need to be separate in a complex environment. There are times you make very good decisions and you have a horrible outcome. This is one of those times. I was involved in a mishap in 2001 where I was the mission commander and it was my call to swap a couple of roles in our flight. I swapped out of an aircraft and went into another, and my old roommate went into the other aircraft. He didn't come back that night. Many signs we should not have done that. Truth be told, we did. Bad things happen. It's an outcome. Everybody thinks they made a brilliant decision when
Mhm.
they text and drive and they don't get in an accident.
Yeah.
Think about that. Everyone could say, I make a brilliant decision based on the outcome that I didn't get in a car accident, but I was still texting and driving. That's a horrible decision, right? We already know that. So there are no other examples I can think of for making a bad decision as a leader.
Just a difficult decision.
A difficult, yeah, that would be it. That would be the difficult decision. There's the difficult decisions you make. Thanks for asking. That's a great one.
You run into so many scenarios where you have to make a judgment call and you don't have a lot of time to think about it.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things too that if you come up with something crazy and it works, you look like a genius. If it doesn't, you look like a jackass.
So every Monday morning, people look back at the decision that the coach had, but the coach had all the data in front of him and said, hey, if we do this, it's an 80% thing. If we do this, it's a 20% thing. If you buy the same thing in the market, probabilities, it's all probabilities now, right?
No.
But people don't, they look at the result, and they call it resulting, and they look back and say, you did this wrong. When there's an accident, that's an outcome. It's a horrible outcome in aviation. But then you go back and you try to figure out where they made bad decisions. I made 100 bad decisions last week. You didn't ask me that. And I'm talking to the safety community, and this is one of the reasons we talk about complexity
Mhm.
thinking so much. This is so important as humans to move away from assigning blame or fault and looking at the system. The system is driving the behaviors. Maybe we have a bad design. Maybe I don't. So we got to fix the system, not the human.
Transitioning, you're working with businesses now and
Mhm.
incorporating all the things that you learned. So what are some of the challenges that you've seen with some of the different business partners or business people that you've had that somebody that's listening to this could benefit from, that maybe they look at their organization and say, yep, we're having that same problem.
All organizations have the same problem. And that's generally because they have humans, right?
Yep.
Everybody thinks they're different. We're different. That's not like us. We do it different. The problems are the same. It's a communication thing, it's leadership, it's an organization thing. These things require you do the work. There are known good practices you need to instill in your organization, build muscle memory and repeat them. It's hard, man. Just you got ego, you got fear, you got a system that's driving behaviors for promotion. You got reward systems that do not reward teamwork, but everybody's running around an organization say, we need to focus on this, we need to focus on that. by the way, I'm going to reward you for not doing any of that. Yeah, that's the biggest challenge. Maybe that's in parity with another challenge. And that other challenge is you got a lot of people out there providing bullshit to leaders. It's a case-based thing where they saw it work once, whatever they did, they had an outcome that was in a complex environment.
Yeah.
So it's the equivalent of them driving around with their texting and driving, had a good outcome, and they come and show you how to text and drive in your organization and go, it worked over there, it'll work over here.
Yeah. It's that false sense of confidence because somebody does it. Well, I managed to do that. I didn't get in an accident. I've had a full
Yeah.
conversation to a text message. Now I'm considered a multitasker and
We can't.
repeat
Yeah.
the bad
Yeah.
decision thinking they're getting better.
We can't multitask. Computers don't multitask. And that's what I learned from the engineers and the neuroscience, which is fantastic. If you ask me the parts of the brain, I can't tell you, even though I probably looked at 20 hours of it. Somebody tried to explain it. I really don't care.
Yeah.
You may care, but I care about how do you use that to explain to folks what's actually going on? How do you make better decisions?
Yeah.
Not what part of your brain's making a decision. Nobody gives a shit about that.
No, it's about what are the processes to
Mhm.
have that communication between your brain and body to do what you need to do.
And your performance world overlaps with what we're doing too. It's just,
Yes.
it's once we blend these together, I
Mhm.
think, like I said, sky's the limit. We're going to see a step change in performance. Teams that, I'm talking sports teams that do this.
Yeah.
Not just the individual performance, but the organization performance.
As I've transitioned into working with businesses and resilient leadership and trying to get them to have a better understanding of their approaches to problem solving and then how adversity affects leadership, a lot comes down to the culture of the organization because you can go into one organization, they may follow the same principles, but it's a very different feel when you go into that organization. How much of that have you experienced?
I want to build on that 100%. So you take a fighter squadron and you inject it or you put it in a air wing on an aircraft carrier. Everybody's been trained the same. Everybody understands CRM, crew resource management. We've all been through the same training ish. And here we are, and we all have a different culture. How could that be? Right? There's many reasons. It's the behaviors. It's the learned behaviors from the leaders.
Mhm.
It's the behaviors that are tolerated in the organization. Right? It's the reward structures. Organizations are the same way. You can't say we want that culture over here injected in here. It doesn't work like that. Think of culture as an emergent property of the interactions. So what emerges from those relationships matters. And the behaviors matter, right? So if you have somebody who has a big ego driving the organization, can't admit failure in front of others, that kind of cascades down. And next thing you know, you have this culture of, I wouldn't say fear, but it's a Game of Thrones going on in there.
It's a lack of trust within the organization. But there's always that perpetual, whether it's military, business, educational environment, it doesn't seem to matter where it's at. There's always that divide between decisions and thought processes that happen up here in the upper administration portion versus your mid management and then your
Yeah.
lower. And there's always a degree of distrust because of some decision that was made up here that had a negative effect to somebody down here to the degree where I've seen people that have been in vice president positions and in the higher level parts of the organization turn around, give out a task. And when that task is almost done, turn around and take it back so that they can take credit for the whole thing. And then
Right.
what does that breed into an organization at that point?
So we talk about work as imagined versus work done. People that plan, this is important. You never want to do a plan and hand it off to somebody else. This from the military, right? We always have somebody who's part of the team, like in aviation, a mission commander, a planning team. Not everybody may be available to do planning, but they're part of the planning process and bring that back. In an organization, those doing the work need to be part of the planning process. Guess what? They need to be part of your strategic planning process as well. They need to leverage the people closest to the work to understand the strategic landscape. You need a map, like in the Army, rock drills, and I think rehearsal of concept drills where you have these big maps that you're walking around and all that. That builds awareness of the intent. If the map's wrong, which it is, you have to create a better map for a better strategy.
Yeah. And we had a couple missions that we were lined up with that somebody was just looking at stuff on the map, but didn't actually really know what was physically on the ground. We've had to come back and say, we can't go that way because there's something there that we don't want to interact.
Yeah, but it's fine because the map says it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to that culture. And when somebody does something like that, where they take credit for something that somebody else has done, the mindset that breeds then is that now you have affected the work ethic of somebody that has been doing the work because their thought process is that it doesn't do me any good to work hard anymore because somebody's just going to take credit for it. That itself is a culture, and it's not a culture that you want.
Yeah.
But
So I think this is the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right?
Mm.
If you get that intrinsic set, which would be doing this because it makes me feel good, I want to do it. You want that because if you can't reward people with money or whatever, and you
Mm.
in the situation you just described, you just crushed every ounce of their intrinsic motivation to do anything for you. Yeah, and that's key.
Yeah. To me, it's equivalent to, we use as analogies with sports. You have a team that's won the championship and you only take pictures of the coaches. You don't take pictures of the players that got you there.
And what? So we always want a hero, right? Look back to Miracle on the Hudson.
Mhm.
You can read the books on this. Everybody looked towards as a
Mhm.
hero, but it's actually the whole crew. He points that out. This is not about me.
Yeah.
But we all want a hero and we all want a zero. We want to blame somebody and look at one person. That one person usually gets a big ego sometimes,
Mhm.
and they'll tell you how awesome they are.
Yeah. And some people gravitate towards that.
Spotlight. We've seen guys like that in the military. They won't do the work, but when it's time to present, they'll be right there.
What are some of the biggest problems that you have seen, especially now that you transition out into the business world and you go in and you interact with a business or a CEO? What are some of the problems that you've seen that other people would benefit from?
I think there's a belief out there. If you think you've been on a high
Mhm.
performing team, you will identify things that aren't there, right? So you
Yeah.
don't have this thing. Think of a rubric. If you were to give people a rubric to show them what they actually did, because teamwork is observable, you can see it.
Yeah.
You can give them that and say, "This is where you are." And by the
Yeah.
way, you're a very low performing team. But that's probably the biggest thing. Everybody thinks they're a team, which they're not. Just because you put them in a team environment, that's
Yeah.
not it. There's real research and science behind this, and you
Yeah.
don't always need a team. You
Mhm.
have to go through training on your non-technical skills, your human factors or teaming skills. You need to be trained on them.
So talk about your consulting business and how people can reach you.
AGLX.com. AGLX doesn't stand for anything. I think there's alcohol involved when we named it, but we've had that for years. We're global. We have offices in New Zealand and Singapore, here in the US, and hopefully we'll be expanding into Europe here as well. We became an attractor over the years, bringing some really amazing folks to work with. As a CEO, you always want to be the dumbest person in the room. I am the dumbest person in our AGLX room, which makes me feel
Yeah.
like I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're growing. We're in a lot of different areas right now. The big thing with the podcast, No Way Out, is we're exploring John Boyd's observe, orient, decide, and act loop about how humans perceive reality, make
Mhm.
decisions, plan, learn, and adapt. There's a connection to artificial intelligence, strategy, great connection to human performance, peak performance,
Mhm.
flow, mental health, psychedelic assisted therapies. We had Dr. Porter on, who I think you're familiar with,
Yep.
really talking about these amazing things. That is an exploration where we can go anywhere. We have Substack growing in popularity. We do a lot connected to the flow system, ICE innovation,
Mhm.
and adaptive strategy. And I think we're like 8 or 10 books at the moment, either where other people reference us
Yeah.
or we have books that are actually going through a process right now. So it's growing, working with financial institutions. We do a lot in fifth generation warfare,
Mhm.
agile strategy, safety. And the reason for that is because what I think we understand is what everybody needs. It doesn't matter where you are, humans interacting with humans. That's what we're targeting.
Where can they find your podcast?
On our website, aglex.com. No Way Out podcast is on every platform out there. I think Spotify, YouTube, Apple. I'm missing, there's 10 of them, 10 platforms that are out there. Growing in popularity. I think we're about 80 shows right now. We'll start producing more. We try to stay in the middle, given the topic. How do you make sense of the external environment? Not everybody sees the world the same way, which is
Yeah.
the point of all this. We'll be adding more Substack capabilities soon. We'll have a subscription model, some pretty cool things with merchandising, connections to some things that people have been asking us to do. We're going to do that. We're working on that now. The big thing I'm working on is sacred geometry patterns. How do you apply that thinking to the market? You and I know Bart Bartoloni. Bart and I are working on some cool things together. They're mind blowing. Teaching him the stuff you and I talked about, and him teaching me the sacred geometry stuff.
Yeah.
I almost wanted to stop everything and just go do that because it's just fascinating as heck. And the connection to the mental health in there as well. Yeah, a lot going on.
All right. So my last question, because everybody's going to want to know, where did the nickname Ponch come from?
There's a TV series that started in the 1970s, I think 78 or 79, called California Highway Patrol. It's called Chips.
Mhm.
And then Eric Estrada had a lot of hair. I think he's a porn star now or something. I don't know. But well, you get a call sign in the Navy for doing a few things. One, screwing up something. I didn't, or you look like somebody. Ponch was what I looked like in the past.
I had a pilot on a few episodes ago. He was with the RAF, and his call sign was Puppy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. There's a third. There are acronyms too. You're like, what's that mean?
Yeah.
She's out of your league. Your wife is way out of your league. He wore the skirt in the house. Yep. Yes, that's him.
Right. If you would let everybody know how they can get a hold of you one last time.
Twitter, Ponch at Ponch AGLX, No Way Out Podcast. You can find us on Twitter as well. We have a YouTube channel underneath aglx.com. We'll have other domains coming out there, but aglx.com, you'll find our website. It's a global thing. You can find us there, connect with us. You can subscribe to our newsletter that comes out every month. LinkedIn, we're everywhere.
Thank you for tuning in. You're the ones that make this happen. Continue to watch, share, and subscribe. We're wrapping up.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Approach. Please hit like and subscribe for the latest episodes. If you would like to be a guest or for Dr. McAllister to speak at a business or event, you can email him at info@drdavismcallister.com. You can also go to his website at drdavismcallister.com.